Just a picture-perfect Thursday. Going to get up to around 68 degrees here in Shreveport, Bossier. This portion of the Tim Fletcher Show is presented to you by Holmes European, where they have introduced the brand-new Range Rover Sport. And it's not like the Range Rover Sport needed anything done to it, but they have redesigned the Range Rover Sport. Land Rover not resting on their laurels whatsoever. The Land Rover, of course, back in the day, they had the Discovery, which is a very cool vehicle, which became the LR3, which we became fans of and are still cruising around one in today. That's 8 years old, not a problem with it. Of course, the LR3 graduated to an LR4, and then there was the LR2, and that's still out there, but it's also evolved into the Range Rover Evoque. So in the last calendar year, Range Rover / Land Rover has introduced the Range Rover Evoque and now the new Range Rover Sport. And they didn't even need to, but they know that to keep pushing forward, they've got to redesign the wheel. And they have. Where are you going to find Land Rover products? Of course, the same spot you'll find Jaguar, Mercedes, and Volvo. Holmes European, HolmesAutoGroup.com, Bert Coons in the Auto Mall supporting the Tim Fletcher Show. Joining us now on the phone is the writer for Deadspin, Greg Howard. Hello, Greg Howard. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. How you doing, sir?
I am doing A-okay, man. I appreciate you joining us this early, but it's not that early for you. It's 7:37 in your neck of the woods, right?
Well, it's all relative.
All right. Okay, there we go. Greg, first of all, how long have you been with Deadspin?
I've been with Deadspin, I guess, for about a month and a half now.
Yeah, I've noticed that you kind of popped up there with your bio, your picture and all this good stuff. Is that your kiddo riding on top of your shoulders or what?
That is actually my godson.
Your godson? You look very, very happy. He appears to be using your head as a bongo. Nothing in the world wrong with that. Kids do tend to use the top of the head as a percussion instrument, and that is A-okay. I was intrigued, Greg, reading your article yesterday. I love Deadspin, and I have from the days that Will Leach, founded the website, from his days at Black Table to Deadspin. And I followed through AJ and, with what the website has done here recently for sports journalism, turning it on its ear. So, of course, it's important for people who are in sports to read Deadspin. And I call this provocative, the article provocative, Greg, because it does elicit emotion. It does cause something. There's a picture, of course, the lead picture for the article is Marshall Henderson at Auburn, taunting the crowd, and there's Auburn kids, giving him the double bird right back at him, and he is yelling into the crowd, and the headline posted across the picture, "What if this guy were black?" Marshall Henderson, how he gets away with being Marshall Henderson. First of all, what made you write this article? What was the impetus for you to pen this?
Well, we've kind of covered him, I guess, since January, and and it was interesting watching him, and his antics that he's become famous for, and it was very interesting. And I'm black, so it's a question that I automatically thought that if a black kid was so he's a troll, right? That's
right. That's the best way to put it.
That's what we kind of call him. He loves the spotlight. He's very words have been used, outspoken, fiery and stuff like that. And he's clearly having fun, and he also, shoots 38% from the field, and
right.
And the question is, he's become this folk hero of sorts, and the question really is if he, the question I had is like, well, if he acted the way he did, as a black male, as a young black male, do you think, there would be, do you think there would be a pro Marshall Henderson camp? And do you think he would even be able to get away with his antics? And from there, I kind of looked into his background and I saw that he does have a pretty shady past.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, than just about everyone I know. And I was a D1 athlete, and he's a D1 athlete, and you have to ask yourself, you hear stories all the time about, black players that just don't have it. Like they have all the talent and stuff, but they're just stupid and they mess up that way. And my whole thing is that I think people are, and which you hear people say that, you know, Marshall Henderson's a rascal, that he'll grow out of it, which he most likely will, you know, but I don't think that black athletes, like, say, Honey Badger, has that kind of freedom, you know, in terms of perception.
Well, that's the one thing that, you know, also was the hook for me. You know, we cover LSU. I've been a sportscaster for 20 years and have talked to the Honey Badger many times. He's a very nice kid who, you know, happened to smoke weed, synthetic weed, as you know, as you pointed out in your article. And you look at Marshall Henderson, he's not just a guy that smoked a little pot in college. He's a guy that tried to purchase $800 worth of marijuana with counterfeit money. He's a guy that has tested positive for cocaine. He's a guy that, you know, sucker punched a player at BYU, as you mentioned in your article. And if Tyrann Mathieu, who now no longer is the Honey Badger, he's shaved his, cut off the blonde locks and is now just Tyrann Mathieu, trying to, you know, reinvent himself yet again after kind of experimenting with having some fun in college with the Honey Badger. And no one is to blame more for the Honey Badger than the media, you know, to be honest with you, as far as that persona, so to speak. Not the marijuana, but the persona of Honey Badger, that we picked it up and ran with it. So be that as it may.
It's a great story. You know,
it's a great story. And it came along at the perfect time because the Honey Badger was a YouTube sensation, and he was exactly, you know, Honey Badger don't care. Well, of course Tyrann Mathieu don't care. He takes what he wants, just like the Honey Badger. It was a perfect match for a mascot and for a nickname. It was absolutely beautiful. But now Tyrann Mathieu is having to, I don't know what the word is, but to me, and please, I hope this doesn't offend you whatsoever, Greg, but he almost has to re-black himself. If that is does that make sense?
How do you mean?
Well, in that he can't be the athlete that he wants to be. He can't be the person that he was wanting to be because, oh my gosh, I smoke pot. So now I've got to reintroduce myself as a different type of athlete. I've got to be this kind of black athlete. I can't be Marshall Henderson. I can't be a guy who has gotten in trouble with the law and done this and that and the other with drugs and continue to be Marshall Henderson. Marshall Henderson hadn't had to change his name. He hasn't had to change a nickname. He's changed schools, but he's still doing the same stuff that he always has done. There was a picture posted about 3 weeks ago where it looked like he was absolutely stoned to the bejeebers. And it could have been fictitious. He could have been absolutely, you know, playing it up for the camera. But if Tyrann Mathieu had done that, you know, after all the trouble he had been in, he would have been skewered and would not even be allowed to participate in the Combine, the LSU Pro Day yesterday. So when I say that he's having to almost reintroduce himself as a black athlete, that's what I mean. You know, it seems like in this instance, he's had to go through, clear this hurdle, crawl under this, you know, tunnel, and do this obstacle course to get back onto the track. Meanwhile, Marshall Henderson hasn't.
I definitely agree. I think what you see with black athletes often that definitely, you know, make mistakes or, you know, delve into crime, or that you see, you know, guys like Michael Vick and Carmelo Anthony, you see them cut their hair, you know, and so that they seem less scary or less intimidating or less black, you know, and you know, Tyrann Mathieu had to cut his hair as well, you know, his blonde locks, which he loves, you know, and that's kind of the thing is that you know, everyone's kind of has, you know, when they get caught up in crime or something like that, you should try to, you know, have to reinvent yourself, you know, but, you know, but the thing is with black athletes, it's a journey that you never get, you know, to that light in the tunnel. You know, you never get beyond that. You're always, I called it suspended animation, whereas, you know, you're always moving to try to redeem yourself, but you're never really quite redeemed. Like you know, Mathieu for all his days is going to be the guy who smoked weed in college and squandered his opportunity. What could have been, even if he turns out to be a good pro, you know, and it's unfair because, you know, that's not just sports, right? It pervades in the sports, but this is a societal thing. This is not a black athlete thing. This is a black thing, you know, and an America thing, you know, and it's the same reason why, why so many black males who go to jail end up back in jail, right? Because the redemption narrative is flawed, right? There's no bad gene that pervades an entire race, but it's hard as a black male to walk into an office, for an interview and have a record because people think that they know you, that you're figured out that you're a finished product, whereas Marshall Henderson, people say, oh, well, he's just a 22-year-old kid. He'll grow out of it, But Tyrann Mathieu's 20, and there are lots and lots of people, 20-year-olds that are smoking pot in college and go on to have great lives, So
well, you bring up a couple of things that I thought, helped make your point, and obviously you're the one that wrote the article, so of course you're trying to prove your point, and I thought you did so quite well. Greg Howard joining us from Deadspin. You mentioned that at Ole Miss, Andy Kennedy, back in January of 2012, kicked off a couple of kids. Why did he kick them off, and what race were they?
Well, he kicked off, Dendricus Nelson and Jamal Jones for being, for smoking weed, and they were caught, I believe, multiple times with marijuana on them, and Andy Kennedy said, you know what, you guys got to go. And, I'll see if I can find his quote, but his quote was really, he said, it's a shame, and there's, and he said, but you get to a point of no return, and obviously the most severe thing you can do is dismiss someone from our program, but that's where we are, and that same semester, a couple months later, if that, you see Marshall Henderson and he takes, a drug test, which he fails, and they find traces of, among other things, coke and marijuana in the system, and, no one says anything. It was shocking to me when I saw that parallel, and it was shocking to me that no one really covered it, and I don't see how you can have a leg to stand on if you just kicked off two people for smoking weed, and then you have actual proof, that another player is smoking weed and doing blow, and I don't see how you can justify that even as an institution. How you're going to keep one guy on the roster in school, and Nelson has to go off to Jackson State.
It certainly seems like that would open up a can of worms. You also reference an article from Sports Illustrated on Tyrann Mathieu, where they describe you mentioned going into a dark tunnel basically earlier, and where black athletes sometimes don't see the light. Well, it seems like Sports Illustrated in their article were pointing at it was going to a much darker place for Tyrann Mathieu.
Right, and they compared him to his father, who killed a man.
Yeah.
And then he's in jail as we speak, without the possibility of parole, and to say, oh, this guy did drugs and he killed a man and now he's in jail, and then to say that Tyrann Mathieu, he's because he smoked weed and got caught with weed multiple times, that the next step is that he could kill a man and go to jail. That's outrageous. I mean, that's absolutely outrageous. And you wouldn't make that step. I mean, you wouldn't make that argument unless you really, really thought that that Tyrann Mathieu was on this path to killing men and to being in jail for the rest of his life. And maybe he is. Maybe he is. You don't know, but he's going to have to evolve into that. And there is no evidence yet that Tyrann Mathieu is going to turn into some cold-blooded killer. And to even bring up that analogy it's slaps in the face of reality. Because at the end of the day, let's put what Tyrann Mathieu did in context. He kept smoking weed after people told him to stop smoking weed. That is completely different than a violent killer, and to even make, I don't think you would make that argument for a white athlete. I really don't, because there's always a chance that, well, he's on the road to redemption. He can get there one day,
Yeah, Yeah, Greg Howard joining us from Deadspin. Got just a couple of minutes with you, and I want to know, Greg, what's been the reaction to the article? I assume this may be the most response you've received from an article you've written for Deadspin?
Yeah, I mostly write about soccer, man. No one cares about that.
Hey, they picked up a point. It was a nice effort against Mexico the other day. The USMNT getting it done.
Huge point.
So there we go. But what has been the reaction? Have you heard, more negative than positive? And does it fall along racial lines as far as a reaction, just the way that, unfortunately, I guess we almost have to expect it to?
Well, it's clearly, like you said, it clearly was a provocative article, and we kind of knew that as it was going to be written that, we're going to get people who like it and people who agree with it and people who hate it and, think we're race baiters or that we're wrong, which is worse. But, it does fall along racial lines, but it's been more positive than I guess we could have hoped for or expected. Because it's really hard to look at the Marshall Henderson case and really map out his journey to being an Ole Miss star. And it's really hard to compare him to players like Matthew and Nelson and even other pro players. And it's really hard to argue against the fact that we look at Marshall Henderson as a rascal kid, and we look at these other young black males as dangerous, capable men who don't have the, dangerous, capable men who don't have the ability to, evolve into something else. And like I said, it's not just a sports problem that we have, right? It's an America problem that we have, and it goes all the way back, until the first black people came here, and so it's a touchy subject, and there are going to be people who say, no matter what you say, no matter what evidence you bring, I don't believe you. I either believe that we're post-racial, or I believe that these guys like Matthew are thugs, and Henderson's not. And then you have some people saying, no, I think Henderson is is trash. And so it's very interesting how many different threads of dialogue that we have like on our comment page right now. But for the most part, you have two camps that one camp, the camp that I'm in, obviously, are people that know that this is a thing, right, that exists,
right?
And that and you can even look at. You can even look at the Super Bowl coverage, and you have, Ray Lewis, who, obstructed justice 12 years ago, right? And people, on network cable were talking about whether he killed a man or if he killed a man, or and this is one of the greatest players that anyone's ever seen, and one of the most openly devout Christians that anyone's ever seen, one of the greatest leaders of men that anyone's ever seen. And you still see him trying to escape his past, and the question is, will he ever be able to, and the answer is probably no, and the same goes with Matthew, and, the same goes with Nelson, and, with Henderson, you could see that, no one's going to care in a year that he flipped off a crowd. No one's going to care that he, did a little pot, and did a little coke when he was a kid, because he was a kid. And that's where it becomes unfair and racist, I would say.
Greg Howard of Deadspin joining us. And Greg, we've run out of time here, man, but dude, I really appreciate you doing this. I thought it was exactly what we need in sports journalism. It is a topic starter. It is a conversation starter. And the more people talk about this, I think the better off we are, not only as sports fans, obviously, but as you mentioned, in a bigger picture. Now, does this make us all better Americans because of Marshall Henderson? I don't know, but I think it's interesting that we at least get to have this conversation. Man, I enjoy your writing. I love what you guys do at Deadspin, and I hope that maybe our paths cross again here in the near future. Good job, and once again, whether you agree with the article or not, I think it is a very thought-provoking article. So nice job, Greg.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, man. Have a great weekend.